I thought I married a quiet man, strong, steady, the kind who didn't say much but showed his love in small, steady ways. We weren't flashy, but we were solid, or so I thought. When he started working late and spending more time with an old friend from college, I didn't question it. That was my mistake. What began with silence turned into secrets, and what I uncovered shattered everything I believed about the man I loved. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about how silence can scream louder than words, how the people we trust most can hide entire lives behind gentle smiles, and how I had to tear my world apart just to survive. Part 1, The Man Who Never Raised His Voice. 200 characters. I met James at a bookstore, both of us reaching for the same last copy of a worn-out poetry collection. He looked at me with those steady green eyes and said, "Take it. You'll enjoy it more than I will." He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was with a softness that drew you in. We started dating not long after that. Dinners turned into weekends, weekends into years. I was the talker, the planner, the worrier. He was the calm in every storm. My family adored him. My friends envied the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room. He didn't shower me with flowers or over-the-top gestures, but he remembered the date I said I first read my favorite novel. He'd cook my grandmother's soup recipe on rainy days. He made our quiet love feel profound. We married after 4 years. It was a small ceremony in the woods behind my parents' home. James cried when he read his vows. I'd never seen him cry before. The first few years were exactly what I wanted: cozy weekends, quiet mornings, long walks where we didn't have to fill the silence. He worked in architecture. I ran a small design studio from home. We shared playlists, grocery lists, and lazy Sunday breakfasts. We even started talking about trying for a baby. Then, something changed. At first, it was little things. He started working late, not just once or twice, but consistently, week after week. He told me a new project was ramping up, something demanding. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? James had never lied to me. He didn't even raise his voice when we argued. But the silence grew louder. He'd come home, shower, eat quietly, and go to bed. No cuddling, no small talk. Sometimes I'd try to ask about his day, and he'd just smile tiredly and say, "Same old." And when we did make love, which became rarer and rarer, it felt mechanical. Like he was elsewhere, like I was an obligation. I chalked it up to stress. I told myself he just needed time. I even made excuses to my friends when they asked why he never joined us anymore. I became a master of deflection. Then came her name. Claire. It slipped out in conversation one night, when he was scrolling through his phone at dinner. Claire said this design might be a breakthrough. I'll have to look at it tomorrow. He mumbled, not even looking at me. Claire? I asked. He blinked. Yeah, old friend from college. She's consulting on the new project. Just temporary. He didn't even flinch, didn't stutter. I wanted to believe him. God, I chose to believe him, because the alternative was terrifying. Because if James, the man who never raised his voice, who cried reading vows, who kissed my wrist when I was sick, could lie to me, then what was real? I googled her that night. Claire Morgan, architect, striking, blonde, single. Her LinkedIn showed she'd moved back into town 6 months ago. The same time James started working late. Still, I said nothing, because I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. Because I told myself trust wasn't something you could halfway give. You either offered it completely or not at all. So I buried my doubts. Until the night I accidentally picked up his phone. He'd left it charging in the kitchen, and when it buzzed, I glanced at the screen. I didn't mean to snoop. I swear, I didn't. But curiosity is a loud whisper in a quiet marriage. The message read, "Wish I was waking up next to you instead." It was from Claire. And James had replied, "Soon." Part 2, The Unraveling. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my chest tightened, my hands trembled, the phone slipping almost unnoticed onto the kitchen counter. I told myself to breathe, to think, to not let panic take over. But it was too late. The silence between us had already cracked wide open. James came into the kitchen just then, a tired smile on his face, unaware of the storm about to hit him. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly. I forced a smile, my voice trembling. Yeah, I'm fine, just tired. He nodded, leaned over and kissed my forehead. Get some rest, love. And just like that, he left, closing the door behind him with a weight I hadn't noticed before, a weight of lies. I spent the night wrestling with myself. I wanted to confront him, to demand the truth and drag it all out into the open. But fear held me back. Fear of losing the man I thought I knew. Fear of destroying the fragile peace we'd built. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I waited. Days passed, and James' behavior didn't change. He was distant, distracted, yet still home every night. His phone was always by his side, screen locked. Claire's name echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I started noticing things, the faint scent of her perfume on his jacket, the way he'd check his phone when I walked into the room, the sudden secrecy that wrapped itself around him like a second skin. One evening, I found myself standing outside the cafe where he said he'd meet a client. I watched through the window as he laughed quietly with a woman with blonde hair and a smile that looked too familiar. Claire. My heart shattered, not because I was surprised anymore, but because this was real, not a nightmare, not a shadow of suspicion, real life, and the man I loved was part of it. That night, I confronted him, not with anger or tears, but with a cold, quiet determination. Who is she? I asked, voice steady despite the storm raging inside. James hesitated. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. She's just a friend, he said, voice low. Friends don't send messages like that, I replied. Friends don't sneak around behind their wife's back. He looked away. It's complicated. I wanted to scream, to beg him to tell me everything, but I knew I needed the truth, no matter how ugly. Over the next hours, the walls came down. The affair, the lies, the late nights, the promises broken. James wasn't the man I married anymore. He was someone I barely recognized, someone trapped between who he was and who he wanted to be. I was left holding the pieces of a life I thought was solid, but now felt like glass, ready to shatter with the slightest touch. Part 3, The Breaking Point. The morning after our confrontation, the house felt colder, emptier. James left early, a hurried kiss on my cheek that felt more like an apology than affection. I stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the street, my heart sinking deeper with every passing second. Days turned into a haze. The baby bump growing in my belly was a stark contrast to the crumbling foundation of my marriage. I wanted to believe James would come back, that this nightmare was just a rough patch, but every message, every secret glance at his phone, chipped away at my hope. I found myself obsessively checking his phone when he wasn't around. I know it was wrong, an invasion of privacy, but I needed answers. The messages with Claire were raw, intimate, filled with plans and promises that excluded me. My name was a ghost in their conversations, a name that no longer held meaning. One evening, I confronted James again. This time, desperation was dripping from my voice. Why, James? Why her? Why now? He looked at me, eyes tired but hard. I don't know. Maybe I lost myself somewhere along the way. I wanted to scream, to shake him until he remembered the life we built. But the man before me was broken, and so was I. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the future I thought I had, the family, the love, the trust slipping through my fingers like sand. I started to withdraw, hiding my pain behind forced smiles and quiet tears. Friends noticed the change, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. How do you explain that the two people you trusted most, your husband and your best friend, had torn your world apart? And then, the day came when Claire showed up at our door. She wasn't just the other woman anymore, she was a living, breathing part of my nightmare. Her eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and defiance as she stepped inside. We need to talk, she said softly. Part 4, Confrontations and Cracks. Claire's presence in my home felt like a storm crashing through the fragile calm I had left. She stood in the doorway, her eyes flickering between guilt and defiance, as if torn between shame and the desire to justify what had happened. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. Talk, I said, voice barely above a whisper. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. The air felt thick, heavy with tension and unsaid words. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Claire began, her voice shaking slightly. When I lost my apartment, I never imagined moving in would turn into this. Her eyes searched mine, as if pleading for understanding, but all I felt was betrayal burning beneath my skin. This? I echoed, voice sharper now. This isn't just a mistake, Claire. You slept with my husband. With James. Her face crumpled, tears threatening to spill. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But apologies felt hollow, like shards of broken glass that couldn't mend what was shattered. James appeared behind her, exhaustion and regret etched deeply on his face. I'm sorry, he said simply. To both of you. I've made terrible mistakes. The three of us stood in that room, a twisted triangle of love, lies, and broken promises. It was a scene I never imagined would be part of my life. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out. But the weight of everything, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the heartbreak, held me still. Claire looked at me again. I never wanted to replace you, she whispered. But it was too late. I already felt replaced, not just as James' wife, but as the woman I used to be before the lies, before the heartbreak. In the days that followed, the fragile peace I tried to maintain crumbled entirely. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, became a battleground of silence and cold glances. James tried to explain himself, to fix what he'd broken, but his words felt empty. His actions spoke louder, secret phone calls, late nights out, a growing distance that no apology could bridge. I found myself questioning everything, my worth, my choices, the future I once dreamed of. How do you build a family when the foundation is cracked beyond repair? Friends urged me to leave, to walk away and find peace. But my heart was tangled in memories, hopes, and the life growing inside me. Every kick from the baby was a reminder of what I had to fight for, not just for myself, but for the tiny life that depended on me. One night, as I lay awake, the tears finally came, long, painful, cleansing. I realized then that this was more than betrayal. It was a reckoning. And I had to decide, would I let this break me, or would I find the strength to rise from the ashes? Part 5, The Hardest Choices. The days after Claire's visit blurred together in a fog of uncertainty and pain. The baby inside me kicked and stretched, oblivious to the storm raging in my life. But every movement felt like a bittersweet reminder of the future I was supposed to have, a future that now seemed fractured and fragile. James tried to make amends, but I could see through the hollow promises. His eyes no longer held the warmth and trust they once did. Instead, there was a guardedness, a shame he could not fully shake. Our conversations were strained, each word weighed down with hesitation and regret. One evening, after the baby was asleep and the house quiet, James sat beside me on the couch. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered. Not yet, maybe never. His silence was heavy, but the hurt in his eyes spoke volumes. I'm so sorry, he said. I never meant to hurt you. I was lost. But I want to fix this, if you'll let me. Fix this? How do you fix a betrayal so deep that it fractures the very core of your being? How do you rebuild trust when every memory feels tainted? I looked away, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I don't know if I can, I admitted. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional roller coaster continued. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of the man I fell in love with, the laughter, the tenderness, but it was always followed by shadows of doubt and pain. My best friend, Sarah, became my anchor during those turbulent times. She listened without judgment, held me when I cried, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. You deserve better, she told me one night, her voice steady, but this is your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll stand by you. Her words gave me strength, but also a terrifying sense of responsibility. The decision wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the child I was carrying, about building a life free from pain and deception. One afternoon, I found myself sitting alone in the nursery, staring at the tiny clothes folded neatly in the drawer. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. Should I fight for this broken marriage or let go and start anew? I realized then that forgiveness wasn't a simple act. It was a journey, a winding, difficult path that I wasn't ready to walk just yet. But one thing was clear, I needed to reclaim my sense of self. My peace. for the sake of the life growing inside me. The hardest choice lay ahead, to hold on or to let go. Part 6, Breaking Point. The weeks that followed brought no relief, only deeper uncertainty and exhaustion. Each morning felt like stepping into quicksand. The harder I struggled, the more I sank. I watched James retreat further into himself, as if the weight of his guilt was suffocating him. But he never truly reached out to bridge the growing distance between us. I began to notice the smallest cracks in our home turning into chasms. The laughter that once filled the rooms was replaced by silence so heavy it echoed off the walls. Even the baby's movements, once a source of comfort, sometimes felt like a cruel reminder of everything that was unraveling. One night, I found myself pacing the kitchen, unable to sleep, heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. I needed answers, clarity, something to hold on to in the chaos. So I confronted him, my voice trembling but fierce. "James, what do you want from this? From us? From me?" He looked at me with tired eyes, and for a moment, I saw the man I married, vulnerable, lost, torn between two worlds, but his silence was louder than any words. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I'm so sorry, I'm a mess, and I don't know how to fix it." His honesty was like a dagger twisting in my heart. How could the person I loved so deeply be so broken? The days passed in a haze of therapy appointments, whispered arguments, and stolen moments of fragile hope. James agreed to see a counselor, and I threw myself into preparing for the baby, trying to focus on the life ahead rather than the pain behind. But the past had a way of clawing back. One evening, I discovered messages on James's phone, not with Claire, but with someone else. Another secret, another betrayal. That was the breaking point. I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I could grant to someone who wasn't willing to fully own his mistakes and fight for us. The weight of betrayal was crushing, but so was the thought of giving up the family I dreamed of. I was stuck between two painful choices, to fight or to flee. But in that moment, I knew I couldn't do either without knowing who I truly was beneath the pain. The fight wasn't just with James anymore, it was with myself. Part 7, Finding Strength in the Shadows. The shock of discovering another betrayal felt like the final blow. But strangely, it was also the moment I began to feel something new, clarity. The haze of confusion started to lift, and amid the wreckage of my broken marriage, I found a flicker of strength I hadn't realized I possessed. For weeks, I immersed myself in therapy sessions, both alone and with James, trying to untangle the knots of pain and disappointment that wrapped tightly around my heart. It was brutal. Each session forced me to confront harsh truths, the illusions I had built, the trust that had been shattered, and the parts of myself I'd neglected while trying to hold everything together. James showed up for the therapy, but it was clear he was fighting his own demons. Sometimes sincere, sometimes distant. His remorse was real, but so was the damage, and no amount of apologies could erase the betrayal or the growing chasm between us. In the quiet moments, when the house was empty, I found solace in the small rituals I reclaimed for myself. Early morning walks, journaling my thoughts, talking to the baby growing inside me. Even the smallest acts became anchors. I was rediscovering who I was, not just as a wife or a mother-to-be, but as a woman capable of surviving even the darkest storms. Sarah remained by my side, a constant reminder that I didn't have to carry this weight alone. She encouraged me to dream again, to imagine a life where I wasn't defined by betrayal, but by resilience. One afternoon, while folding tiny baby clothes, I realized something profound. The future I wanted might not look like the one I'd planned, but it could still be full of love, love for my child, love for myself, and maybe, someday, love that was whole and true. I wasn't ready to make the final decision yet. The battle wasn't over, and forgiveness felt like a distant horizon. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I was beginning to understand that sometimes, the hardest battles don't end with a clear victory or defeat, they end with a new beginning. Part 8, The Beginning of Everything. Months passed, and with each one, I peeled away the layers of pain to uncover a version of myself I hadn't known existed. The betrayal that once felt like a crushing weight slowly transformed into a catalyst for change, painful, yes, but necessary. James and I reached a crossroads. We had tried to mend the fractures, but the truth was undeniable. Some wounds are too deep to fully heal together. We chose to part ways, not with bitterness, but with a bittersweet acceptance that love sometimes means letting go. As I prepared to welcome my baby into the world, I felt a mix of fear and fierce determination. This child was a symbol of hope, a chance to build a new life grounded in honesty, strength, and self-love. The day I gave birth, I held my baby close, overwhelmed by a wave of emotions. Tears streamed down my face, tears for the love lost, for the betrayal endured, and for the future I was brave enough to claim. Rebuilding wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, loneliness, and grief, but there were also moments of joy, laughter, and healing. I learned that betrayal does not define you. It is a chapter, painful but not the whole story. The story of resilience, courage, and rediscovery is just beginning. I chose myself that day, for my child, for my future, and in that choice, I found freedom.